I have two views. I think the Reserve Bank of Australia and the Federal Reserve of the United States should get out of the business of setting interest rates. I
Yeah.
think the market should set interest rates. The interest rate today seems high relative to the interest rate that existed 3 years ago, which was itself a manipulated interest rate. Officially low interest rates represent the political manifestation of a war against savers by spenders. Spenders are more numerous than savers, and in a democracy, spenders always vote to penalize savers and benefit themselves. So, from the first instance, I'd love to see the Federal Reserve in both countries out of the business of setting interest rates. I must say I am delighted with the response of the American economy and the Australian economy, and in particular the Australian property sector, surviving these higher interest rates. It lets you know how much strength remains in the hands of private parties. The fact that we have been able to endure thus far the impact of higher interest rates is, I think, really, really, really heartening. Now, history has shown, at least the history that we enjoyed, if that's the right phrase, in the 1970s, the impact of higher interest rates is delayed. You don't feel them simultaneously because confidence continues to exist as a consequence of 40 years of benign interest rates. I'm not saying that we will be staggered later by a punch that we feel today. I am positively impressed by the strength of the economy, but I am still afraid of the impact of higher interest rates in every sector of the economy, including the private sector of the economy. In economies like the United States at the federal level, where the last time we had dramatic interest rate rises, which was the 1970s, government debt was only 20% of GDP, gives one cause for concern when on-balance sheet government debt now is 110% of GDP. One wonders about the debt service capabilities of many individuals and many institutions. But I need to reiterate the fact that I'm amazed and pleasantly surprised by the resilience of the economy in the face of a higher cost of capital. You know, it's interesting, and you describe it as a cartoon correctly. People are concerned about the debt ceiling, and they're not concerned about the debt. For fun, that you took leave of your senses and went on a 3-month bender. Maybe an attractive idea. If you exceeded your credit limits and you called ANZ or whoever you bank with and said, I'd like to raise my debt ceiling, I don't suspect you'd get a warm welcome. But if the bank and the borrower are the same, which is the case with the government, all of this concern about the debt ceiling and no concern about the debt. I suspect what it is that many citizens believe that they have the right to the benefit of the government, while at the same time wanting to deny the government's depredation on their own purse. That's all I can think of. To me, the debt ceiling is complete theater, and the whole issue is spending and the expectation on the part of the citizenry that they're due services that are paid for by their fellows, or more importantly, of course, by their children and grandchildren. The idea of a central bank digital currency, particularly if you combine it with artificial intelligence and social scoring, the way the Chinese are doing, with a central bank digital currency as opposed to with cash, or better yet, gold, if they don't like the way you think and act, they can cancel. You can get angry at me, but if they can't find me and I have a bunch of cash in my pocket, they can't do much to penalize me. But with a central bank digital currency, they could say Rick's money is no longer. And you've seen some of my posts on social media. I'm afraid they might do just exactly that. It gives the government more control over my own wealth, my own behavior, and the free interaction between members of society, I think is a very dangerous thing. I had hoped in my 20s that the advent of technology would give people access to more freedom and less reliance on government. But this central bank digital currency is probably the single scariest development in my lifetime. I don't know the answer to that. This is going to make me sound like a complete American ratchet head. The only thing that gives me cause for confidence is that there's 450 million guns in private circulation in the United States. And we have a history going back in time of, if you push us too far, we push back. And my hope is that if the big thinkers think about the possible reaction of Americans when they've been pushed too far, that they will be encouraged to prudence, if not by their faith in the American populace, then by the existence of 450 million means of self-protection. My suspicion is that we have had a, 15-year lurch to the left, and we've had a 15-year lurch, too, away from common sense into sort of woke speech. And my suspicion about that is, and I don't want to sound politically correct myself, but both the man and the woman on the street are beginning to think enough is enough. I don't mind reading cartoons, but I'm sick of living in a cartoon. And I have no particular interest in having my family's future determined by a bunch of big thinkers who don't know how to define a woman, as an example, or people who believe that they have the right to distribute your property as you, as opposed to they. And I'm actually very heartened. I do a lot of mentoring of young people, as I think you know. Yes. I mentor a group of minority ex-offenders in the United States. And I need to say that probably in the last year, maybe my audience is self-selecting, but basically every young person's group that I talk to about these circumstances looks at both me and the world in dismay, and says that there's no part of common sense that's in evidence, either with the discussions that we're having as a society or the way that we govern our finances. And I see that as extremely positive. It's that for 20 years, they've ignored this lurch towards socialism. They've ignored this lurch towards woke public speech. And increasingly, the young people who the big thinkers purport to represent in these struggles, the very young people that the struggles are suggested to benefit are saying, this is silly. This is insane. These proposals ignore common sense. I don't think it's going to come back in the near term, but I think that you're going to see a pendulum shift in response to the idiocy emanating from the big thinkers. I think we're going to have a recession. I'm not an economist, but I don't think that the rules of economics or the rules of cyclicality have been ruled out. I think that beginning in 2022, that we've begun a very different epoch than the one that existed in the period 1982 to 2022. I think we had 40 years of benign. The consequence of that is that we enjoyed the benefits of workplace inclusion. Again, I don't want to sound too woke. Enjoyed lower interest rates, and we enjoyed an internationalism. We enjoyed the urbanization of 650 million Chinese, example. I think that that period is over. I'm not saying that the world's going to go to hell in a handbasket, but certainly the period of declining real interest rates is over. Increasingly, the world is setting up into nationalistic economic blocs that will attempt to serve the self-interest of politicians inside these blocs rather than humankind as a whole. So I think that the climate is going to be less benign than it has been. And I also think that recessions serve the purpose of reducing business confidence and reintroducing common sense. I think, too, that although this hasn't been a correct assumption in the last 2 years, that a rising cost of capital will impact investing, and the rising cost of capital will devalue the value of income streams like dividends. So at the same time that the cost of capital through debt increases, that capitalized equities values through dividends goes down. I'm not trying to say that we're going to have a stock market crash. There is so much cash on the sideline. that the stock market doesn't necessarily need to decline, but I think you might see some leadership shifts in the market, and you may continue to see stock market declines. But I do believe in my heart of hearts that we're due for at least a slowdown in the general economy. That isn't to say that I've stopped investing. A person who's a pessimist at age 70 does not start a bank. I think the future of humankind is wonderful, but I think there's probably a reckoning between here and there. And certainly, if you look at the free cash balances in my personal account, you'll see that I've been overall playing defense and building up fairly large cash balances.